Good afternoon, everyone. It is 2 o'clock, so I will go ahead and get us started. I am Taylor Post, Swiftland's Office Manager, and I would like to welcome you all to today's webinar, Customer Service from the Inside Out, and today's presenter, Linda Bruno. Linda has been developing and conducting training workshops for libraries and other organizations for more than 15 years. She offers workshops on topics ranging from leadership skills to returning balance and lots of areas in between. Linda received her MBA from the University of Florida and has years of experience in hands-on management positions. She develops her workshops based on solid research and, more importantly, real-life application. Please welcome Linda Bruno and enjoy her webinar this afternoon. Linda?
Thanks so much, Taylor. Welcome everybody to today's session. So the first thing I'm going to do is a little bit of not a quiz so much as to just ask you if this has ever happened to you. And if it has, just type in the word chat. Type in the word yes in the chat box. So I was thinking about when I developed this program, how often I go into a place where I'm the customer and I get a sense of tension, like people aren't really happy to be there. Has that ever happened to you? Just type yes or no. I see lots of yeses popping up. I don't think I've seen a no fly by me yet. So what happens is when you feel that, many times it's because the internal customer service has never had any attention paid to it. So that's what I want to address today, because if that is lacking, that internal customer service is what I call it, then it's going to be very difficult for customers coming in to visit you, your patrons, to really feel at home and to feel like they're welcome in your atmosphere. So let's take a look at this. First of all, I guess we need to define, as soon as I can find my arrow here, who are your internal customers? Yeah, especially in your closing time. Exactly, Brent. They don't want you in there, do they? Oh, it's so funny you say that because I walked into a place many, many years ago and I was going to spend a bunch of money on a stereo system, more than I had ever dreamed I would spend on a stereo system. And pulled into the parking lot 10 minutes till because we already had it picked out from the day before. Walked up to the door and the employee turned the lock as we stood on the other side of the door. So guess what? The next day we took that nice chunk of money and went somewhere else and bought that stereo system because it was obvious there was no internal customer service, which led to no outside customer service, external customer service. So who are your internal customers? I see several of you are typing, so I'm going to give that a second to populate in the chat box. Other branches and departments, co-workers, co-workers. Everyone who works inside the organization, absolutely. You too, yes. Vendors, supervisors, administration. We need to be really clear on who our internal customers are. Yes, coworkers, absolutely. Everything that you've listed there, which, you don't really think about your supervisors being your customer, but indeed they are because they need something from you, don't they? So they're your customer. Your vendors, as Pablo said, are your customers. So we need to be aware of that because that's the only way we're going to have customer service from the inside out is to know who we actually need to pay attention to and who we need to be intentional about. That's another key word. I started using that word maybe a year or so ago more intentionally, if you will, no pun intended. But to me, that's what many of the things we talk about come down to, isn't it? It comes down to us being intentional about what we're going to do about the situation we need to improve. So I put coworkers just like you did, and supervisors and employees if you happen to be a supervisor, the outside vendors, and that might be the UPS man, the custodial crew, whoever comes in, the people that fill your soda machine if you have one of those, or bring the big jugs of water, whoever it is, they're all internal customers in a sense, and we need to be as attentive to them as we are very determined to be with our external customers because that creates a whole different environment, doesn't it? Just like we just talked about at the very beginning. When we walk into a place where it feels like people enjoy working together, they're helpful to each other, there's trust, there's rapport, there are relationships, you kind of want to stay. I used to go to Panera Bread a lot when my husband was alive and when he could still eat. And we would go in, and there were certain Panera Breads where it just seemed like they really gelled. They worked together as a team. They really seemed to enjoy being around each other. And then there were a couple of Paneras where we went in, and they seemed to be the ones where I don't mean to sound this way, the regional manager came in more often, and he was never attentive to his internal customers. He would, we called it dressing down back in the Midwest, but he would reprimand people, his staff, right in front of the customers. And so we got to the point where we didn't visit those Paneras as often because we didn't like that kind of an environment, just like your external customers won't enjoy your environment. So why is that internal customer service important? Well, we've kind of touched on that a little bit, but what do you think? What's the first thing you think of when you think of, gosh, we need to make sure our internal customer service is as strong as our external customer service? What's the first reason? Positivity. I don't know about you, but I see and hear enough negativity every single day that I don't need to create that with the people that I work with either. I don't want to be one of the people they dread hearing from. Avoiding burnout long term, absolutely, Brent, because if you're around people that think of how much time you spend in your work environment, and if you're around people where it just seems like they don't care about each other and they don't try to help each other, then it can lead to burnout, can't it? Because you're already taking care of your patrons who, sometimes are real nice and sometimes they're not so nice. You don't need that within your work environment. And Papa said the symbiotic relationship in accomplishing mutual goals. And that's what it's all about in the library world. It's all about that in every field of endeavor, really. But when you're thinking about library goals and you're thinking about helping the community, that's sort of shut off. If you're thinking of like a valve, we shut that off if we're not taking care of each other internally. And Ruben said professional courtesy, absolutely. Foundational support. We all need that today. Communication. Look at what you're putting in the chat box. I want you to think about this. I've got some to add, and they're probably very similar to yours, but I want you to think about and pull out one of those as we move forward in this webinar, because I have been reading a lot about change and habits and how we change our behaviors. And one of the things that I keep reading over and over again is that we need a compelling reason to make a change. And I'm not saying anybody here is not good at internal customer service. But I suspect the reason you're here is you figure we can always improve. That's the way I look at things. It's not that I feel like I'm bad at some of these things. It's just that I know I can always, if not improve, I can always be reminded, because it's really easy to take people for granted that we work with, isn't it? It's just like our family members and our close friends. We take people for granted. So this is not rocket science. I never proclaim that it's rocket science, but it is a refresher for all of us. So I want you to find that compelling reason as we move forward. I see kindness and empathy, cooperation and support. Work can be like your second home and you want to have a peaceful place. Absolutely. Branching off of Sylvia, better communication can lead to less mistakes and errors in customer service. Everybody's happier then, aren't they? Paying attention to employees' suggestions. Yes, that's part of it, isn't it? And that's one of the ways we would actually attend to internal customer service. So why is it important here? The things that I wrote down in my notes when I was making them. Productivity, which some of you alluded to. I can remember those times, and I use Panera just because that's one that stands out for me. I've been in a lot of other places, as you have, where you felt that tension. But I can remember people were kind of sluggish. They didn't really seem to be engaged in their work. They didn't really seem to have any sense of urgency about serving customers or cleaning tables or anything like that. So productivity can make a huge difference. Sharon said, when you have true team, it makes us more productive, and we work as one, and we all want to do that, don't we? So productivity, absolutely. Retention, this is something we don't think about, but you all sort of went on the fringes of that when you were talking about your workplace being peaceful and things like that. If I find the opportunity for another job, but I absolutely love the place I work and the people I work with, and we feel like almost family, I'm going to stay where I'm currently working most of the time. However, I may find another job opportunity that really doesn't excite me, except that every day when I go into work, I feel like we're not a team. I feel like we're not working together. And so I leave. And we don't need that either, do we? We don't need good people to leave. And that's what often happens. Same way with absenteeism. I want you to think about this for a second. Let's say you get up tomorrow morning and you have this awful pollen-induced headache, but you know that you're going to work on a project today with one of your coworkers and you really enjoy working with each other and you depend on each other. And so you take a couple of aspirin or whatever you normally take for that and you go on into work and you are productive during the day because you've got your mind off of how you feel and instead you're focusing on the people you're working with. But think of it the other way. You get up tomorrow morning and you have that horrible headache and you know it ain't going to get any better, excuse my grammar, because when you go in, there's going to be tension and friction and nobody really engaged. And so you might just pick up the phone and call in and say, I don't feel very good today. I'm not coming in. And then you hang up the phone and you go get the bonbons and you prop your feet up and watch reruns of Dancing with the Stars. So it actually can help our absenteeism as well. Yes, Shirley, absolutely. Teamwork makes the dream work. You are absolutely right. And Carrie said, a happy, productive workplace is worth its weight in gold. Yes, it is. And the way you phrase that, we say that as a cliche, don't we? But I know lots of people, including yours truly, years ago when I started doing what I'm doing right now because I love what I do and I love my patrons who are my clients, and then all the people I get to work with on the webinars and face-to-face workshops when those are still happening. And I was offered a job making a lot more money than what I'm doing now, but it was going to be a miserable environment. And I knew that because I'd already worked at that place. So you're absolutely right. It was worth its weight in gold to stay right where I'm at. And Sharon said, even when things go bad and management has to cut hours or pay a good environment, will make staff will take the change or downgrade much better. Yes. Stay in a lower paying job or less hours if the staff and management are a real team. That's absolutely true. And as I said earlier, find the one that's going to matter to you. Because when we have a lot of friction, then that friction eventually builds up and leads to conflict, doesn't it? And what's sad is it leaks out. That's why internal customer service is important. It leaks out onto our external customers, that conflict, that sense of friction. It's almost like if you had an odorless gas in your environment and it was leaking and it spreads over everybody. That's what happens with bad internal customer service. So of course we have better problem solving. We're more willing to work with each other. That's an automatic plus for us, isn't it? Because it might be a problem about what kind of programming we need to do, what kind of services we need to offer, how do we need to adjust to a pandemic, how do we need to serve our customers curbside, how do we need to work with city council, how do we need to work with the new semester of students coming in, whatever it is. When we're each working separately, we may come up with some decent answers. But when we're working together because we have that common goal somebody mentioned earlier, the problem solving is richer. A lot of times it's quicker. A lot of times it's a better solution. John Maxwell always says, shared thinking is better than solo thinking. And when I think of that, I think of the fact that if you don't have good internal customer service, you don't have a lot of shared thinking, do you? It's mostly solo thinking and everybody kind of doing whatever they feel is the right thing to do at the time. More ideas, because we're all willing to talk to each other. Our communication is more open. That's a huge part of internal customer service, is a piece of communication. And I hope to be doing a program on communication later in the year for Swiftland. It'll be called Communication is Critical. So keep your eyes open for that, because I'm just now starting to popcorn some ideas about that. But that's all part of it, isn't it? That if we're not communicating, we're probably not going to have internal customer service at the level it should be. Better morale. You all alluded to that. I don't need to go through that again, but I did mention better communication. I didn't even realize I had put that in there. So there you go. Here's one we don't often think about. When you have good internal customer service, your staff members, whether that's you or your coworkers or your supervisors or whoever works in your library, are ambassadors in the community. They're out talking about what a wonderful place the library is and how well the library intends to serve its community and so forth. But think again of the other side of that coin. When there is bad internal customer service and people aren't working as a team, then they're out in the community bad mouthing your library. And what does that do? It encourages people not to come to your library. And I don't know about you, but I hear a lot about statistics in the library world. And the last thing we need is to create our own issues with our statistics going down. So don't you love the fact that you have the opportunity to create an environment where the community hears your folks and other patrons talking about what a great place it is to be? I mean, that's a pretty cool thing that we have some control over. We don't have all control over it, but we do have some control over it. So it gives us a chance to be an ambassador in the community. It builds bonds. It's the kind of thing where I was just reading a novel where when something happens at the job and you've been really a tight-knit group of people providing internal customer service, and remember that includes anybody in your environment, not just the people that are reaching out to patrons, but it builds those bonds. And when there's an issue with somebody that is in your environment, people jump in to help, don't they? I can remember I have a friend whose husband needed a heart transplant many, many years ago, and she was a teacher. And because she was the one that always jumped in to help anybody that she worked with, and so when she needed extra time off, other teachers, and this was before this was a real thing, but other teachers went to the administration and said, we want to donate our leave for Rose so that she could go to a different state that had a better transplant program and those kinds of things. That's a bond, isn't it? That's been a couple decades ago, and she's still in touch with several of those people that she was actually part of the team with. So it builds bonds. We all need more of those. Happier patrons, we've already talked about that. I could just list a whole slide of just say happier patrons, happier patrons, happier patrons, because that's what we want. It's a loop effect, isn't it? Because if we create a good environment and our patrons are happier, then that comes back to us. It bounces right back to us, and it continues to feed our positive environment. You know how bad it is if you just go through sort of a spell of irritated, frustrated, grumpy patrons. It can drag us down, can't it? Well, think of the opposite. If we create an atmosphere where we help our patrons be happier, then that lifts us back up as well. So I like that one. A better image, period. People just look at the library as a good place to be. The last one I've kind of mentioned. Whether it's bad service internally or externally, it's contagious. And I don't want to catch it. How about you? So out of all of those things that you listed in the chat and all of the extra things that I've added, which I didn't have a lot extra add because you all were very on top of that, but I want you to select the one thing that you are going to hold close when you leave this webinar today to make sure you're intentional about giving good internal customer service. You don't have to type it into the chat box, but if you don't leave here with a reason, you won't make a change. You'll just think to yourself, well, that was a nice hour away from my desk or away from the circ desk or away from the students or whatever it might be. I want you to have your reason when you leave here today so that you actually take action. So think about this. What do you think some specific needs are for your internal customer or customers? And I'm thinking things like basic courtesy. Okay, that's a need we have, isn't it? And yet it's so lacking in today's world. Yes, exactly, Pablo. Empathy, understanding. Tali said, encouragement, reliable feedback. Carrie said, feel important and valued. Yasmin said, listening. I love your answers, folks. Just look at what you just listed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at least 6 reasons or 6 needs that your internal customers might have You know what? How much money is any of that going to cost? Support, sensitive to their roles and responsibilities, open communication and honesty. It's going to cost a lot of money, right, Pablo? No, of course. It's free, isn't it? You get to do that. To feel trusted, absolutely. Acknowledgement. Our number one need, I read a lot about our psyche, if you will, and our behaviors and our how our minds work and so forth, our emotions. And I keep reading that still as human beings, one of our number one needs is to feel of worth, to feel valued, to feel appreciated. It takes zero money to do that with the people you're around. Yes, buy-in, respected, safety. They need all of that. You all are good. I'm going to have to go back and copy this chat because you have so many more things on here than I had even put in my notes. They need you to be flexible. They need constructive feedback. Okay, I'm going to go through mine and then I'm going to challenge you to go take just a moment and go back through that list and pick out the one that you know you could work harder at. So let me go through mine first, and then I want you to go through the chat and what I'm listing here. And several of them are going to be very similar. Like you said, understanding and empathy, and I already listed courtesy. Just basic assistance. If you see somebody struggling, if you see somebody that's not quite sure how to operate that particular copier or where to find this or what the policy is on this, just basic assistance without any kind of making them feel bad about that. Patience. We all need patience, and yet it's in short supply in our world. And part of that, from what I'm reading, comes from how we've sped up with technology and texting and emailing and all those kinds of things. We've all been guilty of texting somebody and sitting there for 2 minutes wondering why they haven't texted us back yet. And yet that doesn't show much patience, does it? Yeah, exactly, Carrie. Patience. A smile. What would happen if everybody came in tomorrow to your workplace with a genuine smile? And if the day got kind of long and they got a little bit worn down or a little bit tired or a little bit frustrated, you were able to bring that smile back. That is a natural way of giving internal customer service because it lifts you up as well as them. Scientists will tell us that when we smile, and we really try to mean it, even if in the moment we don't mean it. I don't mean putting that on that funny, it looks like a dog's mouth smile. I don't mean that. But if we really try to smile at somebody, even if we maybe have that headache or whatever, that our brain starts thinking, oh, I'm supposed to be happier here. And it starts to react in that way. So let's all work on that. I had a friend once tell me, I love calling and getting your answering machine because it always sounds like you're standing there smiling at me. And I said, it's funny you say that because when I re-record my message, when the power goes out or whatever, I stand up and I smile while I'm recording it. And it lifts people up somehow when they call. So why not smile at people? Non-judgment. Like I said, what if they don't know how to work that printer? And they've been here for 6 months, they should know how to work the printer or the copier or whatever it might be. Don't judge. Some people are more technology challenged than others. That would be me. But they just don't want to feel like they're being judged. And one of the ways that I always encourage people to make sure people don't feel judged is to say something like, and not fakely, please don't be non-genuine because people sense that. Don't be insincere. But I'll say to people, don't you wish these all had to operate the same way? I always tell people I wish there was a law that computers all had to operate the same way. Those kinds of things. Carrie said judgment-free zone here. That's good. That's exactly what we're looking for. And it can be about anything, can it? It's not necessarily about who they are as a person or anything. It's about whatever they're experiencing in the moment. You want to be inclusive. Absolutely. Caring. Have you checked in with somebody? I texted somebody the other day and I was checking in because her mom just died and her dad, she said, was getting grumpy and demanding. And I said, when I texted, I said, but you didn't tell me anything about yourself and your husband. Are you guys doing okay? I just wanted her to know it's not just about the fact that her parents have gone through this. It's about her as well. So sometimes just simple caring. Yes, be fair. I tell him not to worry. My hubby just learned how to use a computer last year. Oh, Carrie, that's funny. My brother still doesn't even have an answering machine, much less a computer. It's amazing. He does text occasionally, like, twice a year, which is okay. I get it. So, but being caring with people, again, doesn't cost you a cent, makes the world go round, and it makes things a lot nicer when all we're seeing, I don't know about you, when I turn on the TV, all I see is negativity, whether it's a program or whether it's the news, and sometimes even on commercials. There's a lot of negativity when you think about all the lawsuit commercials that are on and all the drug commercials that are on. It can kind of weigh on you. So let's just as a group today decide that we are going to be the ones that go out and really try to lift up those people around us. I'm not talking about 24/7. I'm not talking about all day long tomorrow you have to go around looking people, looking at them in the eyes and seeing if they're okay or anything like that. Just that maybe your goal for every day is, how can I make today better for somebody? That's internal customer service and then some, isn't it? So caring is part of that. Now, all of that said, and yet we still go out to all these places where there isn't good internal customer service. So what do you think might make it challenging for you to give great internal customer service? And before you answer that, I want you to go back and look through the list, and I'm going to go back to my slide as well. Maybe it doesn't want to pop up. Well, that's weird. Okay, well, that was just kind of weird. So let's see if we can come back up with our needs and see. Okay, we did, and there we go. That was weird. It wouldn't come back up. Apparently, I can't work it in reverse. So anyway, the needs that are listed there, pick something out of the chat box or something on this slide and the next, which I'll advance here in just a moment, of the thing that you know deep in your heart you could do better at. And you don't have to type that in the chat box, but you need to identify that. Remember, we talked about we need to know our compelling why. Now we need to know our what. Why do we need to improve? And what do I need to improve? Because some of you are already naturally talented in some of these things we just talked about, but there's probably an area or two that you could improve on. So think about that for a moment. I'll advance the slide and show you the other ones that I had, as well as the probably dozen or more that were in the chat box. And then I want you to think through which one you're going to work on, and then we'll talk about it. Here are the other needs that, whoops, oh, it's not going to let me do it again. Okay, so I can't go back very easily. Let's try that once more. There we go. There are the other ones. Okay, take a moment to do that, and then we'll check in again. Absolutely, Ariane. You can ask questions anytime you like. Just type it into the chat box if you would, please. We've got a lot of people in the room, and that's why we mute the microphones. So feel free to do that anytime. I usually run up pretty close to the end of the webinar, and that's because I always encourage any questions or comments in the chat box while we're talking so that you don't have to try to remember them until the end. I see Ariana is typing, so I'm going to hold on just a second. Okay, so hopefully she's still typing. Okay. As she's typing that, here's why I want you to identify where you need to improve, because now you need to identify what is going to make it challenging for you to do that in that particular area. In other words, for me, patience is hard. I'm a get it done kind of girl. I know that's very cliche, but I'm a get it done kind of person. And patience, I have to be really intentional about that. So I know that's a challenge for me to try to give good customer service in my environment because I struggle with patience. I'm better than I used to be, but I'm not where I'd like to be. So what might make it challenging for you to give great internal customer service? I always tell people I will likely step on your toes at some point during a lot of my programs because I want to push you out of your comfort zone. And I want you to be honest with yourself. I try not to make your toes bleed, but if I make you squirm a little bit before the end of the session, then I feel like I've done my job. So go ahead and type into the chat box, why do you think it might be challenging for you to improve in one of the areas we just listed, either in the chat or on the slides that you saw? Why might it be challenging for you? This doesn't have anything to do with your library. It's you personally. Because if we don't identify that, I promise you nothing will change when we're done today. Yes, exactly, Sharon. I'm the same way. When a coworker isn't a team player, I lose my patience. COVID and masks made patience hard sometimes, especially being unable to hear. Absolutely. Just plain old stress. And we could make a whole list of where that comes from, couldn't we, Tally? I apologize. When I can't hear your names pronounced, it's a little more challenging for me to pronounce them correctly. So I apologize if I don't pronounce them correctly. I want to identify you correctly, but oh, good. Thank you. Sharon said when someone needs help but insists they don't. Yes. And so, let's address some of that. Let's ask ourselves why those things bother us. Because really, a lot of those things are on them, aren't they? So if somebody insists they don't need help, then that really shouldn't bother us, should it? And I'm not sure why it does or why we lose patience. I've asked myself that a lot. And sometimes I actually ask myself why in the midst of me not being the best self I can be. I'll say, why is this bothering me? This is not my issue. This is their issue. Or something they said and it hurts me or it intimidates me or whatever. That's my issue, isn't it? And I make my own toes bleed sometimes, folks, because that's the only way I grow. So that's what I want you to think of. Ariana said, what do you do if you feel if your coworkers are not receptive to your internal customer service? Okay. I need an example of that, Ariana. And I will also share with you at this time that if there's an issue that goes a little deeper than what we can cover in a brief webinar, please drop me an email. I am always happy to respond to those emails. As a matter of fact, it makes me feel good because I know people are listening and they want to delve a little deeper. So if there's something that's a little deeper than what we're talking about today, or it's going to take too long to go through the scenario, just drop me an email. You have my email address at the bottom of the first page of your handouts. I love to hear from people and I always respond. So please feel free to do that. Now, here's the caveat to that. You may not like my response, and that's perfectly okay. You can delete it. I'll never know. So my feelings won't be hurt. But if there's a grain of truth in there or a grain of helpfulness in there, then you'll have that in your toolbox and you can possibly use it. So Ariana, if you can, I'm going to read a few more comments and you'll probably have your answer in there. Brett said very on or off person. So it's tricky when you have someone that is half in on something or riding the fence. Yes, it is. And again, here's one thing I want you to hear clearly today. You can only do what you can do. Did you hear me? You can only do what you can do. Here's the troublesome part of that. Sometimes we tell ourselves this is all I can do when really we didn't make the effort, right? We rationalize. I read a couple of years ago in a magazine and it said, do you know rationalize just means you tell yourself rational lies. And that kind of stepped on my toes at the time as well because I tend to rationalize things. But you can only do what you can do. So again, don't take that on yourself. Dee said personal problems. Yeah, that can make it be challenging, can it? Empathy or lack thereof sometimes. Not given a chance because we're so busy doing our work. But again, a lot of the things we talked about, the smile, the patience, the caring, the feedback, the inclusiveness, being fair to people, respecting them, all of that, it doesn't take any money and it also doesn't take much time. We think it does. But think about the issues we can cause because we aren't patient with people, because we haven't given them good feedback, because we don't show respect. That actually causes more time to be lost, doesn't it? So we need to give up that idea that we can't because all of this stuff is out of our control. And I want you to think more about who you are as a person and why this might be a problem. Kiana said, I think the supervisor-employee relationship makes it difficult to empathize because of the need to produce results. You have to be conscientious of, yes, you do. Yes. And when staff doesn't listen, yes, Ernestine. I agree with all of that. Now, here's where I'm going to get pushy. Any of you who know me know I'm pushy. One of the things I love about my job is I get to push people and see them grow. And I occasionally even get notes from people that say they grew, and I just do my little happy dance. This is mine. This is what makes it challenging for me. It's my personality. And of course, sometimes it's theirs as well. And I can easily throw them under the bus every time and blame it on their personality. But in reality, like I said earlier, why is that even bothering me? However they're reacting, we're human. So that's one of the reasons it bothers us. But what if, and some of you have heard me use this analogy before because I have come to love this visual. I'm a visual person. I want you to close your eyes for a second and picture a yardstick. If you've ever seen one of those in person, we don't use them a lot anymore. 36 inches, 1 inch on one side, 36 inches on the other side, usually a piece of wood. So it goes from 1 inch to 36 inches. But change the 1 inch to A and the 36 inches to Z. And that's our continuum for the day. What if you came in today and you thought, I give internal customer service maybe at a level of K. I don't ever expect you to get to Z on that A to Z continuum on the yardstick. You're not perfect. You never will be. You're going to have bad moods. Your core personality is going to take over sometimes, and you're not going to be as patient or empathetic as you would like to be. But what if on a regular basis you give that at a level of K? And I don't know where you think your level is. It might be a G, it might be an R, whatever. What if we just move you further toward that Z continuum by a couple of letters in how you deal with internal customer service because you became more intentional about it? Would that not make a significant difference in your life, at least, and certainly some difference in your work environment if you become that intentional about it? Lisa said the effort is repeatedly one-sided. You lose your momentum to do the right thing. But Lisa, I'm going to challenge you on that. Yes, you do. I get it because I have. Okay, I'm just going to be honest with you and transparent. Y'all know I want to tell you the truth, and the truth is I'm in the same boat you all are. You lose your momentum. But what I find happens when I lose my momentum is I'm the one that feels bad because now I'm not my best self. So the next time that happens and you lose your momentum and you find yourself behaving in a way you know really isn't what you would like it to be, I want you to come up with a motto for yourself. Mine happens to be one of them is, this is not serving me well. So if I lose my momentum and I'm not interacting with people the way I would prefer just because it's all one-sided, then I need to say to myself, this isn't serving me well because it's making me feel bad. Do you see the difference there? Or as Dr. Phil would say when somebody was telling him a little fib to try to make themselves look okay, he'd lean across the table and say, how's that working for you? So we can't let their attitudes and their lack of engagement influence our intentionality to do better. If they choose not to accept it, that's their deal. They're allowed to do that. It's frustrating, isn't it? And you're going to continue to be frustrated. So I'm going to say, too, that if it's all one-sided, focus your attention elsewhere. There are pockets of other areas that you can maybe improve that internal customer service, right? So if it's always all one-sided and you just aren't getting any response at all, then let's take that energy, that positive energy we've created trying to do the best thing, and direct it somewhere else. Cynthia said, when a team player agrees to a commitment and doesn't follow through. Yeah, and then you have to kind of open up a communication line, don't you? And say, can you help me understand why you said you were going to do this and you weren't able to complete it? Because a lot of times there's more to the story. Because if they are a team player, something has happened. Rose says, in regards to a patron that will not ask for help even when they clearly seem like they need help, I think because we sometimes feel that we're there to help, so why not accept the help we're willing to provide? Yeah, exactly. Why wouldn't you, right? That doesn't make any sense. And yet, I'm going to tell you in a minute why I think some people do that. Sometimes because they've had a bad experience with a staff member, they assume we're all the same. I think that's part of it. But I think too, Rose, that some people are intimidated by y'all. Don't you think? They walk into a building that contains all the knowledge in the world, or that's how they feel. And when you come up to ask them if they need help, it makes them feel less than. You are not doing that. Do not take that burden on yourself. That is not your responsibility. But because of their own insecurities, you walk up to them, ask them if they need some help, and they feel like, I can do this myself. You know, the little kid that says, Mother, please, I'd rather do it myself. It's that kind of thing. Ruben, you said it very well. Run your own race, right? Run your own race. Be your best self. What they do with it is up to them. But I am challenging you today, right here, right now, June 11th, 2:40 p.m., to be your best self. There will be times that you slide back from that, I promise you. But I also promise you, and the reason I'm promising is because I know this has happened for me, that every day I work toward being my best self, when I look back 6 months ago or a year ago or 5 years ago, I see progress. I'm not at Z yet, and I'm not going to live long enough to be at Z, just saying, but I know I've made progress, and I want you all to make progress too. That's why I'm here today. Sharon said sometimes your coworkers are not the level you think and they can't bring to the table what you're bringing to the table. That's a very good point. If we give our help unconditionally, love that word, Sharon, unconditionally, we human beings have this reciprocity expectation, don't they? It'll be reciprocal. They'll give their best effort. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't, just because they don't want to be bothered. And sometimes they don't because their best effort doesn't look like what you had hoped it would, if that makes sense. Whether you see the person grow or not, just think to yourself, you helped and you grew because you helped and you recognized it's on them if they don't grow. So personality can be a challenge. And I think you've recognized that in what we've discussed already. Time and being short-staffed, that some of you alluded to that. But again, I want to really encourage you to understand that many of the things we're talking about today don't take extra time. And if they do take a little bit of extra time, they often save us some time down the road. So again, don't rationalize yourself into staying the same when you're done here today. Any kind of other pressures. For it to be challenging for me, when my husband was dealing with his cancer and all the treatments and all of the very significant issues he went through for 11 years, there were periods in there. I'm just going to tell you, I didn't really care about internal customer service. There were other pressures. Some of you have other pressures, right? And recognize that and understand it and know that you can do better when you feel better. Sharon said if we view them like they're a little sister or brother, it's easier to give that help. I like that. I like that. Other pressures can be part of that, but then don't choose, another one of my favorite words, to use that as an excuse. It can definitely be a reason at different periods of your life that you just can't make the effort. But at some point, you got to choose not to use it as an excuse anymore, don't you? Awareness. That's what we're here for today. The awareness piece then leads to the intentionality piece that I already talked about. So just be real careful of that. We need to have that awareness so that we can become intentional. So we talked a lot about the why and the what and what's going to challenge us. So what are some ways to just basically improve our customer service? One way would be to volunteer for the not so fun jobs. Sharon said we all have those days, so remember that and it helps. Absolutely, Sharon. It does. Remember it and then don't go over the line to use it as an excuse, right? I know people in my own life, couple family members, couple friends, where anything that happens is now an excuse for the next 3 months to be miserable. And they'll take anybody with them that'll go. I don't want to live that way. I love those people dearly, but I do not want to live that way. And when I've had my own struggles, been pulled down into that vortex. I don't know if that's the proper word, but we have to move forward, don't we, at that time? So volunteer for some not so fun jobs. Nobody wants to do that, but it just shows that we're willing to make the effort. Misery loves company, but do you really want to be in that company? Exactly. And I don't want to be the one who other people are thinking that about, right, Sharon? I don't want to be the one that says misery loves company. Somebody's looking at me saying that. The downward spiral of dysfunction, absolutely. And it becomes a vortex. That seems like a really significant word to me. I don't even know why that popped into my head, but like it sucks me down, right? So we don't want to do that. So we're going to volunteer for the not so fun jobs. We're going to perform random acts of kindness. It is contagious. Absolutely, Sharon. I seem to somehow, by osmosis, include in most of my programs something about being positive and making choices, because I figure that's what life is basically about in many instances. So I'm just going to continue to encourage you to do that. So somebody list in the chat box, what's a random act of kindness that you could perform to lift the spirits of your internal customers? Baking, food, Ariana, right? Bring them lunch. It can be candy. It can be muffins. It can be potato chips. It can be celery sticks. People just knew you thought of them. They're not going to be extremely thrilled with the celery sticks, probably, but they'll be thrilled. Giving a kindness bar, I love that. And it says something, doesn't it? If you're having a tough time, or you just want to reward people for doing something really cool, get those little Smarties that are in the little packets and pass those out anonymously or whatever. A bottle of water, absolutely. A helping hand, flowers. Just saying something kind and listening. That's huge, isn't it? Listening is a random act of kindness. Do you hear that? And it's true, because people don't do it anymore. It's a lost skill, a random gift, or a note for helping out. And here's what I want to say, Ruben. When you do the note, handwrite it. I don't care if it's on a Post-it note or a little piece of paper that you found off of a notepad. Note cards are 8 or 10 for $1 at the dollar store. If you can, picking up a pack of those and just having them handy and writing somebody a note for something special they did is so meaningful. And the reason I say that is because people keep them. It makes them feel appreciated, right? Sharon said, help them with their workload when you know they're overwhelmed. Yeah, even if you're a little overwhelmed yourself, when you work together, the burden is lighter. Money, just saying thank you, an appreciation card or a gift card for lunch or a coffee, offering assistance if they need it. Yes, the handwritten notes are more personal. Make crafts for everyone. Some of us, Sylvia, are not talented that way. You would not want my craft, but the thought would be there. Savannah said offering to switch shifts with a coworker. Yeah, instead of them having to beg people to do that. Huge, folks. Just those things that you're talking about. Say something positive that you've noticed they've been doing, or how nice they look today because they've got a pink shirt on and their silver hair looks really nice with the pink shirt, or whatever it might be. Something positive. That's what we're talking about. Look for ways to help. That's what several of you mentioned. So I'm not going to cover that again, but that's part of it, isn't it? Offer assistance. Just say, I'm a little slow right now. Is there anything I can help with? After they pick themselves up off of the floor, because that's not the normal way coworkers react to each other, is it? They'll probably find something for you to help with. Now, we need to be aware when we do some of these things, some people will abuse us. They'll abuse the offer, won't they? They'll take us for granted or take advantage of us. That's on them. That's on them. That just means you don't have to offer that to them again. Doesn't mean you should never offer anybody again any assistance. Absolutely show appreciation somehow. But we know that there are people out there. I've been, I have been the person that has been at the other end of that, where I've offered help and I've really put some effort in, and then they wanted it done more and they wanted it done more, and what gets rewarded gets repeated. And so I finally have to set a boundary, and that's perfectly okay. Show that appreciation. Several of you mentioned that. Say thank you and mean it, right, Sylvia? Look them in the eye and be specific and say thank you so much for taking care of that child while I was with the mom. Or be very specific. What gets rewarded gets repeated. And I'm not talking about manipulating people. I'm just talking about that's a nice world to live in. When I reward people, even if it's just with my words, and I say, I really appreciate you doing XYZ. That helped me out so much. Whether or not they repeat it, it's a bonus if they repeat it. But certainly if I don't thank them, they aren't going to want to help me next time. And yet it happens so often within our internal customer service because we live and work with these people. I don't mean we physically live with them, but it sure feels like it sometimes when we spend all that time together. Share stories with each other about what's happening in your library, not negative, gossipy kinds of stories. That's not what I'm talking about. But did you see how happy Johnny Smith was the other day when he came in and I got down on the floor with him and played with him when his mom was busy doing this or that? Just share stories with each other, the good stories about your library. When I challenge people to come up with good stories in their library, they look at me like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And then when we start talking, the ideas start to pop up like popcorn because you do this every day. You have happy stories in your library every day. Start keeping track of them so that you can share them because that lifts people up. It lets everybody know you're on the same team and that you have the same vision, which is to serve your community to the best of your ability, whatever that community is, whether it's students and faculty, whether you're in a special library, whether you're in a public library, municipal library, doesn't matter. There are human beings out there that need you. And that's what it's about. Because when the stories are negative, and they will be sometimes where there really is an issue that needs to be talked about, not just something that happened, but an issue that needs to be handled, then you can brainstorm solutions because you've been talking about this stuff all along and you're a team now and you're trying to provide that internal customer service. Number 8 says handle requests promptly from your internal customers. Here's another way we take people for granted. They need something, but it's just somebody I work with. I don't have to get to that till tomorrow. And yet their frustration level is building because they really want to proceed with whatever it was that your piece was a part of. So handle that request promptly. Number 7, Ken, oops, it doesn't like to fill them in for me that way. Help brainstorm solutions. That's internal customer service right there, isn't it? When you get together and you know there's an issue in your library and you help, you're welcome, you help brainstorm those solutions because you're all part of the same team then. You're all engaged. You all have buy-in because you've joined together to solve this issue. And as I said, handle those requests promptly. Somebody mentioned this earlier. Sharon said sometimes just acknowledging their efforts or frustration. Hey, Laura, you did a great job with that difficult patron. Absolutely. We need to hear that. Yes, it's an expectation. Yes, it's part of the job. But we need to hear that, don't we? It reminds me, Sharon, of I used to do team training with a group where we worked with our workforce board through the local college, and we would have job skills workshops. And we would have them periodically for veterans coming home from Afghanistan or Iraq. And when you would talk to the military veterans and you would say, what did you do? One young fellow said, Army stuff. I said, okay, what was your proudest moment? And one lady said, I averted an air collision between 2 of our planes the second day I was working as an air traffic controller. And I was stunned. I said, how much were the planes worth? And she said, well, I'm not sure, but I could probably find out. And I said, okay, because we were working on resumes. I said, find it out and put it on your resume. You just saved the government that much money in assets and the lives of however many people were on each of those aircraft. And she said, she smiled at me very calmly. And she said, yeah, and I got invited to lunch with the president. And I said, the president of the United States? And I don't even know who it was at the time. It doesn't matter. And she said, yes. And I said, you need to put that on your resume. And I even told her, I said, don't put the name of the president in case somebody doesn't like whoever that president was. But, just helping people see what they do matters, doesn't it? It can be something that's really just part of the job, but it matters. We have to pat each other on the back for the good and the bad events. Absolutely. And listen. That's a part of that, isn't it, Sharon? Be willing to listen to them vent a little bit. Now, you don't want to become an environment where everybody's complaining about patrons or coworkers. That's not what we're talking about here, but everybody does need to vent occasionally and say, boy, I don't know why Mrs. Smith was so upset today, but I just really felt like I couldn't help her at all. And then when Sharon says, but you did the best you could, and she did leave here with what she needed. So you've listened to somebody vent, and that makes them feel like you care. Remember, we talked about caring and empathy and compassion and understanding and all of that. It's part of it, isn't it? Listening is part of that. Answer questions fully. I put this one down because I caught myself not doing this. Sometimes we do our jobs for so long that we're pretty sure anybody that's in our orbit understands what's going on, right? Exactly, Sharon. Small actions make the team stronger and more dedicated to the whole, and that's what we're looking for. And if we've been in our jobs for a while and we kind of think everything's pretty obvious, but maybe this one little part, and somebody asks us a question and we give them that one little piece, and they don't really want to ask the rest of it because it will make them feel less than. So answer questions fully. And you can even say something like, this is probably more than you need to know, but did you realize you have to do this before you do this? They may not. Yeah, Ruben, library jargon. And don't answer with library jargon, right? Even for people that have been around a while, we all get our own little pieces of library jargon and we use those, and they aren't really helpful and they make people feel less than. I have to ask, I've been around libraries for over 15 years now, and I still have to ask sometimes. And sometimes the jargon, when we start to really dig into it, is localized, if you will. It's for that particular system. They've come up with their own terms. They kind of start thinking it's library-wide as far as the library world in general, and it's really not. So make it easy to work with you. That's kind of what we're summarizing here, isn't it? Make it easy to work with you. What if you got up with that goal every day? How can I make it easy to work with me today? Number 12 says everything you just said. Show consideration and respect. And of course, be courteous and friendly every single day. I don't really care about your headache. Of course I care about your headache. But I don't think that gives us an excuse not to be courteous and to be friendly. So the questions then become, because I started right off telling you, you need to leave here with something that you're going to do differently today. What can you do more of to better serve your internal customers? Write yourself a note. If you didn't print out the handouts and you're not keeping notes on your handouts, write yourself a note. If you did print out your handouts, it's right on the bottom of page 2. I've given you a couple of lines to write your answer there. What can you do more of to better serve your internal customers? Take a minute to think about that. 12 and 13. Okay, that one popped right up. There you go. Show consideration and respect and be courteous and friendly. You're welcome. Whoops, number 11. This advances a little differently. Make it easy to work with you. One of my favorites, Darcia, one of my favorites, make it easy to work with you. If that was just our goal every day, I guarantee you that some of these other things would happen automatically, wouldn't they? So we talked about all of those. The question was, what do you need to do more of? The next question for you is, what might you consider doing less of to better serve your internal customers? That's just as important. Grumbling, venting, being nosy, yeah. Complaining, absolutely. All of the above. You have to take what you're thinking right now and what you're typing into the chat box right now or writing on your handouts right now. You have to take that and actually start using it tomorrow and remind yourself of it frequently. Interrupting. Yeah, it's a common human malady, if you will, right? Kiana said, making it all about you. Yeah, it's called being egocentric. We're knee deep in me, right? Saying that is not my job. Ooh, yeah. If you're there, other people think it is your job, right? if you are right there, right then. So we talked about what you can do more of, what you can do less of, and what can you do better. You're already doing it, but you could probably improve a little bit. Just trying to give you some food for thought. Does anybody have any questions as we wrap up today? Assuming is a big one, Ken. I do that just in life, and I need to be better at that. Stop what you're doing and put the patron first. Internal customers as well, Dee, right? We're talking about our internal customers today because that's how we serve our patrons better. So we need to be able to stop what we're doing with our internal customers too. Overthinking. Yeah, that's a problem for me as well. For lots of us that have that particular personality, right? Thank you all for attending our workshop. If you need me for anything, drop me an email. I'm always happy to respond, like I said earlier. So now you need to go and serve your internal customers. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Linda, for an informative webinar this afternoon. As always, we encourage you to keep an eye on the Swiftland CE calendar, the Swiftland Facebook page, or your message from the listserv. Thank you everyone for attending and have a great rest of your day. Thanks, Deb. Thanks, Linda.